Hello, beautiful souls. We are so excited to bring you this episode with Nancy Pohl, who is a certified nurse midwife and owner of Emergence Midwifery and Wellness. We go deep in this podcast all about finding that inner voice in the medical field, making informed and educated decisions, and also talking a little bit about the business side of being a mom-owned business owner and navigating how that life looks 365 days, 24/7. We are so excited to bring you Nancy. But what we want you to know is that she is a compassionate certified nurse midwife with a proven track record providing quality and family-centered care in homes, birth centers, and the hospital setting. Nancy attended Rutgers University for undergrad, where she also received an athletic scholarship to play lacrosse. She completed her graduate school midwifery education through the Frontier Nursing University in Hayden, Kentucky, graduating with honors. It was 2018 when, growing a baby of her own, that Emergence Midwifery and Wellness was born, with a strong desire to decentralize care and bring quality, individualized, evidence-based midwifery into homes of those she serves. In addition to perinatal care, Nancy provides well women care, preconception, family planning, contraception, and miscarriage and loss support, all in the comfort of your home, which she translates all throughout all of pregnancy and postpartum. So if you're in the East Valley of Phoenix or the local Phoenix, Arizona area, absolutely check out Emergence Midwifery as a potential for your home birth midwifery practice. Nancy, hi, I'm so glad to talk to you today. Lexi and I are here, and we are so grateful for your time and excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Of course. Well, I couldn't think of a better person to bring on this podcast that really just embodies this, motherhood experience of kind of watching moms shift in their identity role, but then also being a business owner and mom yourself. So there's so many things that I want to touch on today with you. But first, I think that the average listener probably needs to learn a little bit more about you. Obviously, you're a midwife, you're a home birth midwife that specializes specifically with births at home. Would you share a little bit about maybe the differences to the average person who may not know any better, if you will, the differences of what an OB versus a midwife is, and also maybe what a midwife looks like in a hospital setting versus birthing center versus home birth, and why you felt called to do home birth midwifery?
Yeah,
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Okay, so there's the medical model of care, and then there's the midwifery model of care. And, kind of stereotypically, people tend to sort of align one way or another and have a viewpoint of, I feel like midwifery model of care is specializing in low risk, physiologic, normal, healthy birth, and having a healthy respect for intervention and tools and equipment if we need it, right? But seeing just birth as just this beautiful normal process that we get to journey along with women and families on. And the medical model sometimes, it's definitely more clinical, definitely more technology and testing and most of the time intervention, because it's not, hospitals usually aren't set up for healthy, low risk birth. They're set up for a business. They're set up for the over medicalization of childbirth, unfortunately. So very, very two different approaches to care and viewpoints on care. Now we get those blessings that are in the hospital setting, and just like we kind of get those ones in the home birth setting that maybe this isn't their jam either, but that can cross. So I am, I guess, stereotyping what most models look like, but that's kind of it in a nutshell, really. Midwives, there's all different types of midwives, and midwives can work in a number of different settings. You have midwives, of course, that work in the hospital. 98% of nurse midwives, which is what I am. I went to nursing school for 4 years and then graduate school for 3. 98% of nurse midwives will work in a hospital. I think that's why a lot of times in our practice we get you're a nurse midwife and you work at home, you don't have an office, you don't have a hospital. Yes, on purpose. So hospital setting is kind of like the default of where I mean, so much of birth takes place in a hospital, and we're seeing a shift in that, but a small shift, but still a good one. And then you have birth centers, whether they're attached to a hospital or they're freestanding, right? And those can be nurse midwife owned and run and employed, but you can also have other types of midwives, like professional midwives, licensed midwife. It really depends on your state and their guidelines, right? And then, so by default, because there's many entities such as a hospital or a birth center, depending on the state you're in, that don't allow for certain types of midwives to work in places, by default, you have a lot of midwives that work in the out of hospital setting, just because somebody else prevents that, right? So very state by state. But here, in Arizona, we're really blessed to have, hospital, birth center, and home birth midwives in all different scopes of practice. Some have formal schooling, some don't, some are licensed, some aren't. So very, very broad. I feel like midwifery is more that way, where you're either an OB or you're not. You either are a board certified surgeon that works in a hospital, or you're not. And then there's a few gems. One of my dear friends, Dr. Fishbun, he actually works in the home setting as an obstetrician. So that's really nice too. But that's the exception, not the rule.
That's so cool to hear. I mean, I feel like that so much knowledge was just left there for someone who is maybe pregnant, exploring options, or down the road as well. What made you choose to go into the home birth midwifery route?
Yeah, so I grew up hearing, like, I always knew I wanted to be a nurse. I always wanted to help women, specifically with women who were pregnant and laboring and birthing. And for a while, like in my teen years, I thought, well, I'll be a nurse, because that's like what I heard about. You don't hear about midwives in your high school career day or something, which we're hoping to change that too. But when I heard my aunt talk about having a midwife, and even though she birthed in the hospital, I was like, wow, I got to look into what that is. And then very quickly fell in love with the thought that a woman could lead you through your pregnancy, your labor, your birth, your postpartum, and kind of like hold that space for you as a woman and a family to take that. Not I'm the doctor, listen to me. I'm the nurse, listen to me. I'm the hospital, listen to me. It was just like giving birthing families back their power in that. That was so important for me. And for a long time, I thought I could do that. I never really thought I could do that in a hospital, because it's just not where I personally and professionally align. Like, if I'm sick, maybe I'll go to the hospital. If I'm high risk and I need surgery from a board certified surgeon, I'm going to call it my favorite local OB. But if I'm healthy and low risk, I want to stay at home, because leaving home is your first intervention. And so for a long time, I thought I could take the best of both worlds. I could take my hospital knowledge and background. I could take, maybe home's a little too scary for some people, and then just have this perfect, beautiful, I'm going to work in a birth center model. And what I found is working in a small group practice in a birth center in Southern California, while it may be a nice middle ground for a lot of people, it really does restrict you. You have to be admitted at a certain time. You have to, if they're a licensed and credentialed birth center, you have to say yes to certain things. You may have to follow certain policies and procedures that you don't align with. And it just started, the longer I did it. When I was a baby midwife, it was kind of like, yeah, this is fine. This is a good middle ground. And then the more I was with women and birth, I was just like, we're changing the physiology of this birth. We're asking someone to leave their house that doesn't need to. Now, if you're having triplets and you have high blood pressure, please leave your house. There's a lot of great hospitals and a lot of great midwives and OBs that work in that. But if you don't, it's like, we're going to change that the second you walk out the door. And we're going to kind of submit to this, again, over medicalization of birth, and we don't need to. And so it really, I think birthing my son, Landon, my oldest, was a reaffirmation of like, yep, I want to do this. I want to, hands down, want to be a midwife. I mean, who goes to grad school with a baby? But here we are. It worked out for me. And, but also because I had him in a birth center, and I just was like literally in labor in the car. I was like, why am I driving here? Why did I just leave my bed? Why did I just leave my bathtub? And it was that false sense of security that we now know, isn't there. Again, if we're remote, if I'm 2 hours away from a hospital, love birth centers. But your home for most people is a safe place where you feel loved, and supported and safe. And so I really wanted to bring the model of care that we provide, the background, the knowledge, that kind of give it back to those families, and then also be able to come into your home and offer like that safe space, that model of care.
That's beautiful, because birth should really be what you want it to be. Like if you want to be home, it's nice to know that there are so many options out there. And like you said, if it's too scary to be at home, there's midwives that deliver at hospitals. That's what I did. I had a midwife deliver at a hospital, and it actually was exactly what I needed, because I hemorrhaged after with my daughter. So like, it was a good thing that I was there.
Yeah.
But I think intuitively we know kind of what we need and what we want, and being able to have these options at our fingertips more and more, especially because of what you're doing is really special.
Yeah.
But
thank you. And I was on a consult with someone last week, and we were talking, and I said, you know what, I really think that, this provider at this hospital, this midwife would be really great fit for you. You should call her. And she did. And they're so happy. And then just the other day, that same provider was like, you know what? I think you might be better off at home with Emergence. And so it's really not about, I'm a home birth midwife, I think everybody should birth their baby at home. I think everybody should have an option. Just like, if you have a breech baby or you have twin babies, it doesn't mean you have to birth in a hospital. It makes you have slightly higher risk potential, but it doesn't mean you're higher risk at 4 weeks pregnant just because you have two babies, And so it's really kind of talking through all the ins and outs. That's why I like consultation with a number of different midwives, even in a number of different settings. Like if you're not sure, if you're like 100% going to the hospital, I don't want to hear anything, that's fine. But also if you're sort of in between, like interview all providers in all places, interview providers that are like, okay, like this is how I align. This is how I think, feel, and believe. This is the birth outcome I want. So, if you're looking for unmedicated vaginal birth with like doula support, you research that provider, you research that hospital. Like, is this what they do? Like, do doulas love them? Like, do they have a good vaginal birth, success rate? If they don't, like, you might want to interview another one, right? And so I think really just like taking in all the information. The thing that hurts my heart so much, because we also do like annual visits, family planning, birth control, preconception, PAPs, all that stuff. So as a nurse midwife, I'm past my childbearing years, but I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known I had the option. So in other countries, the standard is like everybody gets a midwife until you need an OB. And I wish it was that here. I wish it was just like, hey, you might want to try this model and I'm here if you need me. Because that's what we tell our home birth families. You don't even need a clinical reason for yourself or your baby to transfer to the hospital in labor. You can just be like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. Or maybe I would like an epidural, or I kind of feel like some Pitocin would help these waves, and you can go like that. Like we don't even need a reason to go other than you want to. But when you're somewhere else, it's not like you can like be in labor, check yourself out and be like, I'll birth at home, unless it's unassisted, So you always have that choice of higher level of care, but it doesn't mean you need to start there.
Yeah. One thing I really love that you talked on early on was reclaiming that power back to the woman, right? And we talked about this with one of our guests recently, is really allowing women to have those choices, to have those educated options so that they can make an informed choice that's best for themselves. But really it comes down from stripping away the power that other people have and building back up the innate power, wisdom that you have as a woman and as a mom. Can you speak to that process a little bit about how you see yourself as a person that gives that to other people in the birth space, but also watches women's transition into that? Have you seen people kind of evolve to find their inner voice and find that inner calling during that process?
Yeah.
Or maybe after?
Yeah. And I think, yeah, and I think you hit it. It is, once you've seen the transition and change, it's really hard. I think it's hard for a lot of times, both like first time parents, right? It's hard for them to be like, okay, I 100% fully trust in this model because, like, you said so. Like, of course, I'm going to say, like, this is amazing. This is an amazing way to have your baby, right? Um, but I think once you see hundreds and thousands of families journey through that, and like they're in the bed with their baby, the dad that was worried about safety and finances with his arms crossed in the console is like, this is incredible. And it's like his idea all along, right? We'll give him that. But I see that. We see that over and over and over again. And like, nobody did that but you know? I mean, we might be there to make sure like you're having a good time at your birthday party, but like, it's really about like just protecting that space. It's not, this birth was this because I was here or because it was you, or because it's really just like we held that space. We made sure everything was quiet and safe and undisturbed and normal and low risk and healthy. Like we, when it veers from that, we can kind of, you know, protect that too. And like I said, there's a time and a place, but when you see that over and over again, when you see that like faith over fear lived out in daily life, it's just like there's just nothing like it, you know. And I think there's very few areas in medicine, and especially in obstetrics and midwifery and gynecology, that allow for that. It's so fear-based. I mean, you know, you've got recommendations from ACOG, and 2/3 of the recommendations are by opinion by some board. It's not science or evidence based. And even that, I mean, the last couple of years, I think we can it's safe to say that sometimes the science isn't always right and so clear either. So when you get in these spaces of like midwives, especially in the community setting, that see this over and over again, when people just learn to trust and they journey through that and they come out on the other side, feeling empowered, feeling knowledgeable, feeling about like, I did that. And get to make all the choices, not from fear, not from coercion, really literally just get to dive in and decide. I tell people from initial consultation, if you want 5-minute appointments where I tell you what to do about your baby's vitamin K or how you're going to birth, we are not your practice, because like we're going to come alongside you and give you the, hey, this is what you want to think about, this is what you want to consider. But really just reclaiming that is so much about what birth used to be until it moved into the hospital setting, right? So
Coming back to that, knowledge is power and reclaiming your power. I mean, being able to advocate for yourself and speak up for what you want. And if you don't want a 5-minute visit, it's important that you say so. And we, as women especially, we're very intuitive, and we have to remember that and trust that that inner knowledge is really taking you in the right direction. And I actually experienced this. I changed from my like OBGYN with my first my first baby at, I think it was 36 weeks. Like that was the most terrifying choice to make, but I knew I didn't want that person to deliver my child. And I had been speaking up for myself that I didn't want an epidural. I wanted to labor at home as long as possible. Like I wanted to come in, like I wanted to have a natural, unmedicated experience. And it was like, yeah, sure. Okay. Like that. I just felt so brushed over.
yeah.
And then that's when I found a midwife who could actually give me that. And my child at the time was also breech. And so they wanted to do, I forget the name of the procedure.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yes.
TV.
And that requires an epidural. Like, at least for me, they were like, I think they numb you and like all these things that I didn't want.
Yeah.
And that was one of the driving factors as well, where I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen anymore. Like, I'm going to stick up for myself. And I told my husband, I'm like, we're not doing this. I know the baby's due like maybe tomorrow, like within just a few
tomorrow
weeks.
or maybe in 5 weeks, but let's change it up.
Yeah. And then I switched, and then they were like, do some forearm stands, like do a little bit of belly massage and your baby's going to turn. And that happened. And like, that was all because I stood in my power and I stood up for myself. And what I knew internally was what
I had to do.
Right.
And so if you're like, for anybody that is just feeling like they know, but they're afraid to speak up, like
Right.
it's so important that you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. And good for
Yeah.
you, Lexi, because I'll tell you, like, we all work for you. Like, you guys are the consumers of care, right? And so without that, this is the care I want. This is how I want to be cared for. This is who I want to learn from. This is who I want in my birth space. We don't have a job. And so nothing changes if nothing changes. Like, that practice, when you left, they might have been like, we need to reconsider. Like, we've got, who knows how many moms left or how many families wanted to leave. And the silver lining in that is, like, you found a midwife and you had the type of birth that you wanted to have, and it's never too late, and I think that's great and that's commendable. But it is scary. It's scary to go through change, and especially when you're like, yeah, I could have a baby tomorrow or in 5 weeks, no big deal. But when you surround yourself with someone who believes in you and aligns with what you align with, that's half the battle. Because not only are you like, okay, I'm having my baby and I'm 36 weeks and I just like changed it all up, but if you're like, but I trust this person and I know that this isn't the care I want, but this is the care that I desire, like, that's just half the battle. So that's awesome. I love that.
It's just so important to trust people and to know, like what we were talking about earlier, that there are options, and interview people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very big life moment. Like,
Totally.
just don't go with just whoever is like down the street
Yeah.
and that everybody else goes to.
Yeah,
Like,
and I'm glad you said that. Not who's down the street, not who your friend used. The two of you might pick very different midwives. Now, Lexi, it better be us in the future. No, I'm just kidding. I'm saying, like, you can't always go with like, oh, well, my friend used this person. We hear that a lot, like in midwifery or pediatricians or whatever. How do you know you have the same alignment? How do you know you have the same desires, right? It's okay to want different things, but like, find the person that aligns with what it is that you want, right? I'm going to pick a very different provider if I want hands-on scheduled all the things in the OR on Friday, versus if I'm like, I'm not doing labs, I'm not doing ultrasounds, I'm not listening to my baby. Those are two different people and they're both okay. It's just like you have to be in alignment with what you want, and then find those people that align with you. Because if you're in a place that goes against, most people have their things, in the medical model these days, it tends to be breech is bad, twins are high risk and always need, an OR. And when you are with a person from the time that you find out you're pregnant, yourself and your baby and then your family is just lives in that fear-based mentality. And you're just waiting for something, right? Because you're just told all the things. Instead of going, okay, breech is a variation of normal. Breech is normal, right? Like, there's less babies that are breech, but if it were to happen, like, having that provider that aligns with that. And so that's another good example of, even though like you got to that 36 weeks and like, hey, this isn't, but you might go in thinking you've got one baby head down, and if all of a sudden you don't, then you might make a different plan, and that's okay too. Your plan can change. Always knowing your options is great for that.
Yeah, really, I think that's the most important part, that reframe too, from a women's health standpoint, right? I think so many times women's choices, women's voices have been suppressed. And so we don't feel like we can make that choice. We just, whatever the doctor says, the doctor says I need to be induced. The doctor says I need to have a scheduled C. Well, what do you want? What does your body tell you? What is your innate what is your inner wisdom telling you? What are you feeling called to do? And so too, like, if, people are listening and they feel called to do something different, I think that's like, they're trying to ping you. They're trying to give you clues. This is your body trying to tell you something. So lean in, listen to it, even though it feels uncomfortable. Right. I know when I was researching home birth midwifery, I was the first one, like, in my family and generations of family, and none of my friends were doing it either. So I was very much going against the grain. And it felt very uncomfortable and like really nerve-wracking, but I still felt called. I don't know why I was supposed to. I just felt like that's the direction I was supposed to call. And so I think that a lot of women sometimes maybe feel like they don't have that choice, or they don't have that ability to choose. And in anything, and at all women's health, health and healing and all of that, and in birth, you have a choice. And I think that's really important for women to know.
Yeah. And I think too, knowing, because sometimes we'll have, I usually say 2 people are on the couch during the consult. One's a little bit more convinced than the other. Now, the 2 that are on the same page, my absolute favorite, because I'm like, look, happy wife, happy life. Get it? Like, come on. No, but it's bringing into have that conversation. Now, if a woman is sitting in front of me going, I don't want to birth at home, but he wants me to, different combo. Like, you're the one carrying the baby, you're the one birthing the baby. That's not a discussion that we're going to just honor that. But usually it's, the husband, the partner, that's going, I don't know. But when you can bring them into a consultation, you have the ability to ask and answer questions, because it's all the misconceptions. It's like, oh, well, what if, or you've seen a birth scene in Hollywood and you think that's how they go, or you've heard something about your friend's birth, but you don't realize the 80 interventions that happened before you heard the horror story. And so you don't know what you're saying no to, right? And so I think it's really important. You might get off that call and go, these home birth midwives are crazy, and I'm never doing that. But at least you've had the conversation, and at least you know the option. We can carry meds and IVs and oxygen and are trained to handle bleeding and shoulders and resuscitations, because most people go, oh, like, I didn't know that. It's just handled differently. And yeah, it looks different than 20 people rushing into your room, but like, it's still, we're trained to do those things, right? And so I think having all the information and making the best choice for you guys from that information is really what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, shoot, I could talk about birth forever, but I would love to pivot even more so into you found your calling in helping women birth their babies at home. Then you started to grow your own practice. From what I know, Nancy, you were solo for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And then just these last few years, you've, onboarded an incredible team to support you. And that, walk us through that transition of, being a mom, having children, also having an unpredictable schedule, running a business as a mom. Mm-hmm. Walk us through all of that, and what was your driving force to keep you going?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the 3 of us could chat about this for quite some time too, right? I think when you're truly in alignment with, God's call for your life, it's just everything unfolds and makes sense. I've intentionally prayed about the women that would join this practice way back when I was just out of grad school and just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna work in group practice. I didn't want to be solo in the beginning. I wanted that community. I wanted that connection. I wanted other like-minded providers. When you work for someone, and sometimes in a setting where you have a little bit of control but not much, it was okay for me in the beginning because it taught me just a lot of great things personally and professionally. I've worked in homes and hospitals and birth centers. I've started a birth center in a hospital. I've worked in all the different roles, and I love my journey. But it just became very apparent back in like 2016, like, okay, I want to do this where I can come into somebody's home. We can have decisions together, not this policy says. And it's like, of course, I'm not throwing out policies and procedures and safety. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, there needs to be, informed consent, shared decision making and stuff, not just because we work this place and there's 5 of us, we all need to do it this way. And so when I started to feel myself pulled away from who I was or what I believed, or even just, not being surrounded by Christian women, like, that's really important to me. I just was like, I'm ready to do this. Right. And so I dove into my own practice in Southern California. It happened just very organically, where a few of my repeat families came and were like, but I just want you to come. And so it was like, I was in a group practice, but didn't have the benefit of group, because I would just go, okay, fine, just call me anyway and I'll come. And so I was kind of, working full time, not having days off anyway. And so I'd say that's kind of the downside of being your own, solo, is just it's 24/7, 365, and you miss birthdays and you miss anniversaries, and that's okay for a while. But from sustainability, both in what I've experienced and what most of us experience, and, by evidence and research, you get to that burnout, right? And when I felt like I was being a really great midwife, I felt like I was being an awful wife or mother, and there was zero balance. And so sustainable midwifery then became my goal, not just my own practice. It was just, how do we do this, but do it sustainably? So we were called to leave Southern California. We came here to the East Valley in Arizona in summer of 2019. And I, got all my family settled and everything. And who would have thought 2020 and everything going on in the world would have just blessed my midwifery career? Because, people that never thought they would birth out of the hospital started going, well, maybe. So when I started in March of 2020, it just took off. I've been booked every month since. And then so in January of 2022, brought on 2 other midwives, and just recently hired another one. And it's just been incredible, because it's like we get to serve more families, but we also get to feel like we just have a true balance of, work and life, mothering and being a wife and having intentional time off. The first time I got to turn my phone off, like totally off, or only use it for pictures on vacation, I sobbed for like 30 minutes, because it had been probably 10 years since that happened. And so, that sustainability piece was so important. And I think when you have that vision and you go, okay, like now let's take the steps to create that. And then when it's happening, it's like, it's worth all the work and the effort and the whatever. And then in turn, like, even though my business feels blessed by this and our families we serve and everything, we feel blessed for each other. That then pours over into our family, because we pour, we come to each section of our lives with a truly like filled cup. Like we feel restored. We had the biggest, Caitlin and I had the busiest week last week. Thank you, Blue Moon. 7 babies in 6 days. And I'll tell you, somebody made a comment on one of our pictures, like, you're glowing. I'm like, this is birth 7. Like, we're so happy to do this work and to do it together. And, I don't know, it just doesn't, when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And so, like I said, the people surrounding you feel that. And I think that helps, motivate and encourage you to keep going, right? And to kind of have that balance in all aspects of your life. So.
And you can totally see too when somebody is walking and living in their purpose. Even with you now, like we can just see your energy and how you speak about it and how beautiful that is. And I know, even talking to Lexi as a business owner too, like when we talk about her business, it just lights her up and it just makes her look, radiates energy that is palpable, if you will. And so I think that from what I've experienced too as a business owner is